When I entered the house after a year in the war, no one hugged me. My family looked at me as if I had ruined their plans. Only later did I realize that they were already celebrating my death. I'm Jake, 32 years old, male, and I don't think I've ever felt more out of place in my own home. When I came back from deployment, I expected, I don't know, maybe relief? Hugs, something human. Instead, the first words out of my mom's mouth were, "You survived." Not in a happy, tearful way, more like she was processing a problem she hadn't planned for. Dad froze halfway across the living room, hand still on the armrest of his recliner. My sister Cecilia was holding her boyfriend Pender's hand so tight their knuckles were white. The air felt like someone had just confessed to a crime. I set my hat down on the counter. "Yeah, I made it back. Been waiting for clearance for months." Mom actually stumbled back. I thought maybe she was in shock, but then I saw it. The look they were all trying to hide. Not relief, not joy, disappointment. That moment hit me harder than anything I'd seen overseas, because deep down, I knew it wasn't new. I'd always been the family screw-up. The one who didn't finish college, the one who wasted potential by joining the military. I guess I'd hoped coming home in uniform would fix that somehow. But then Dad cleared his throat and said, "Son, maybe you should extend your deployment. The family could use the insurance bump a little longer." He said it like it was a business proposal, like my life was a stock investment that hadn't matured yet. Something inside me went cold. I could have yelled. I could have thrown something. But instead, I just smiled. "Can't," I said. "They found something in my lungs from the burn pits. Doc says it's a rare form of cancer. 8 months left." I'll never forget the way their faces changed. A flicker of shock, then relief. A tiny, secret smirk that slipped out before they remembered to look sad. That's terrible," Cecilia said, pressing her hand to her mouth. Mom put a hand on my shoulder. "At least they take care of the families, right?" "There's a death benefit?" I nodded. 400,000, I think. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch pretending to doze while they whispered in the kitchen. I heard my mom's voice, calm and practical. "Pender, you can finally start your business," Cecilia giggled. "And the wedding will be fully paid for." Dad chuckled softly. "Smart investments, kids. We'll make it last." Their laughter sounded like a knife being sharpened. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I'd faced enemies before, but I'd never known betrayal like this. If they wanted to celebrate my death, fine. I'd give them a show worth remembering.
Hey guys, real quick before we keep going, don't forget to sub and drop a like if you're enjoying the story. Thank you very much. Enjoy watching.
Quietly, I picked up my phone and hit record. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Mom humming as she brewed coffee, like nothing about last night had happened. Dad was already at the table, flipping through bills, while Cecilia scrolled her phone, pretending not to see me. I poured myself a cup, watching them. The silence felt loaded, like everyone was waiting for someone else to break it. "So," Dad said, not looking up. "You'll be seeing doctor soon?" "Yeah," I lied easily. "They're running some tests, but they said it's terminal." I let the word hang there, like smoke. Mom gasped softly, a hand to her chest. Cecilia squeezed Pender's arm and murmured, "At least you'll be comfortable. They'll give you the good meds, right?" I gave a weak smile. "Something like that." Inside, my blood was boiling. They weren't mourning me. They were planning around me. You could feel it, the way Dad's tone turned practical, the way Cecilia started asking what would happen with my stuff. When Pender mentioned how stressful bills had been lately, I coughed into my hand. A subtle reminder of their supposed windfall. I could almost see the numbers running behind Dad's eyes. That afternoon, he came to me with a manila envelope. "Family paperwork," he said, sliding it across the table. "Just something to keep things organized." I opened it. It was a life insurance loan form, $100,000 using my policy as collateral. He'd filled everything out except my signature. I blinked at him, playing the fragile act. I don't know if I understand all this, Dad." He gave me a sympathetic smile that didn't touch his eyes. "You don't need to. We'll handle it. You just focus on resting, okay?" I signed, handshaking, pretending it was from weakness, not rage. Later, while they thought I was sleeping on the couch, I overheard them again. This time, Pender was bragging about quitting his job. "Why work when we're going to be rich in 5 months?" he said. The boss was a moron anyway. I faked half my degree and he never even checked. Mom laughed. "Good for you. You'll have your business started before the insurance even hits." I felt my stomach turn. It wasn't just greed anymore. It was joy. They were excited about my death. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. My face was pale from lack of sleep. But my eyes, those were sharp again. They thought I was dying? Perfect, because now I had 8 months. 8 months to make sure they paid for every second of what they'd done. And for the first time since I came home, I smiled for real. Over the next few weeks, I leaned into the role they'd written for me. I started coughing at random times, letting my voice rasp. I'd wince when I stood up too fast, forget where I put things, and act dizzy. Whenever Dad brought up money, it worked too well. The pitying looks came, but they were mixed with calculation. Mom kept helpfully reminding me to rest whenever I tried to leave the house. Cecilia began asking what I wanted done with my things when the time came. She even joked once about putting my car in her name early, just to save time. I laughed it off, but inside, I was burning. Every night after pretending to sleep, I'd slip my phone out and record their conversations from the hallway. I caught Pender bragging again, to Cecilia this time. When the check clears, I'm buying that F-150. Cash, Cecilia giggled. You should. It'll look great when we're married. And you'll finally have your dream wedding, Mom chimed in from the kitchen. Celia's wedding, paid for by your brother's sacrifice. How poetic. They laughed together, clinking glasses. That was the night I realized they weren't just waiting. They were planning. The next morning, Dad cornered me in the kitchen again, holding another set of papers. Hospice authorization, he said. You know, just in case things move fast. Better to be prepared. I looked down at the document and saw what it really was, a medical power of attorney. It gave them full control over my healthcare decisions if I became incapacitated. My hands trembled, but not from fear this time, from rage. I signed, pretending to be too weak to read it properly, then went upstairs and scanned the papers with my phone. I uploaded them to a hidden cloud account, labeling the folder Evidence. That night, I heard Cecilia crying in the next room. For half a second, I thought guilt had caught up to her, until I heard Pender's voice, low and angry. You said 2 months, Cece. You said the doctor told him that. I know, she whispered. But what if it drags out? What if it takes longer? He sighed. Then we'll figure something out. My blood ran cold. Figure something out. It wasn't just talk anymore. From that moment, I stopped pretending this was about greed. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were trying to make sure I did. And if that was the game, fine. I'd play it better than they ever could. 2 days later, Mom did something she hadn't done once since I'd been home. She made me coffee. She brought it to me on the couch with that sweet, shaky smile she used when she wanted to seem caring. You should rest, honey, she said softly, setting the mug down. You look pale. Something about her tone made my stomach twist. I waited until she left the room, then lifted the cup to my nose. The smell was off. Bitter, chemical, wrong. I pretended to sip while she hovered in the doorway, watching too closely. Then I set the mug down and thanked her. As soon as she turned away, I poured it into the sink and saw it. A thick, grainy residue at the bottom that sure as hell wasn't coffee. I took photos, scraped what I could into a plastic bag, and hid it under the loose floorboard in my room. My hands were shaking, but my head had never been clearer. That night, I texted Tristan, my old squad mate, the only person I trusted. I told him everything. The fake cancer, the insurance, the loan, the coffee. He didn't reply for a full minute. Then his response came through. Document everything. Don't tip them off. And for God's sake, don't drink or eat anything they give you. I followed his advice to the letter. I spent the next day driving 2 towns over, opening a new email and uploading every recording, every photo, every signed form. I labeled the folders by name, Mom, Dad, Cecilia, Pender, and wrote timestamps and short notes for each file. By the time I got back, I had a plan. If they wanted me gone, I'd make sure every move they made took them closer to destroying themselves. That evening, Dad called a family meeting at the dining table. He spread more documents in front of me and said, almost proudly, "These will make things easier when, you know." His voice trembled just enough to sound believable. I flipped through the pages, funeral arrangements, insurance claim forms, even a pre-written obituary. You've planned all this? I asked quietly. Mom smiled. We just want to be ready. You don't have to worry about a thing. Cecilia nodded, eyes bright. I even picked the photo for your memorial page, the one from graduation. You look so peaceful in it. I stared at their faces, calm, prepared, not a shred of guilt between them. That night, lying in the dark, I decided I wasn't going to the police yet. Not until I caught every single one of them in their own words, in their own actions. If they wanted a funeral, I'd give them one, but it wouldn't be mine. I started buying things like a man buying armor, small, stupid-looking gadgets that felt like hope, a pen that recorded, a cheap wall charger, with a mic inside, a thrift store clock with a hidden camera. I told myself I wasn't becoming paranoid. I was becoming practical. Every conversation I'd already captured was uploaded, time-stamped, backed up in 3 places. Still, I wanted the kind of proof that made a judge lean forward, not shrug. While I shopped, the house kept unraveling. Pender actually handed in his 2-week notice the same afternoon I set the devices up. He swaggered into the kitchen, grinning like a man who'd already spent his future. Why slave for someone else, he announced, loud enough for Dad to hear from the den. When I'll have cash in 5 months? Cecilia squealed and clapped like they were announcing an engagement, not the slow collapse of someone else's life. Dad smiled feverish. The sound of their celebration was the exact opposite of the funeral songs they'd been humming. It made me sick and furious, and strangely, deliciously calm. I placed the pen on the kitchen counter where Dad always kept his reading glasses. I tucked the charger behind the couch, plugged into the outlet so anything said in the living room would be captured. The clock went on the dining shelf, the one that watched every family meal and every whispered conspiracy. I tested each one, watched the little LED lights blink steady like tiny witnesses. Then I set bait. I printed an actual-looking accelerated death benefit application. Real form layout, professional header, everything. And filled in the details except the signature. I left it in a neat folder on the dining table with an urgent, sticky note inviting whoever handled my affairs to sign. I wanted to give them the exact opportunity to forge my name, to take the step from gossip to crime. If they touched it, I'd have them on video. If they forged it, I'd have them on tape. If they lied to the insurance company, I'd have cover letters, timestamps, and the login records that would show who accessed my portal. That night, as if on cue, the house hummed with plans. Cecilia and Pender tiptoed past my door, their voices low and excited. "We can fax it in. Dad will sign it while he thinks it's something else," Cecilia whispered, the same voice she used when she planned outings with her bridesmaids. "If we get that prepayment, we can start the business, book the venue, pay off that loan." Pender laughed, the sound too loud in the quiet house. "I practiced your signature, man. You should see how good I am." My stomach dropped and then clenched into something focused. That laugh was the kind that sits on a witness stand and gets replayed. The next morning, when Dad asked me to look over a form, I played the part. Weak, barely conscious, the veteran, too tired to read the fine print. I let him shuffle the paper under my nose, watched his hand tremble when he reached for a pen. I kept my face slack, let the old act carry me. He didn't sign that day. Instead, he said he'd do it later. But later is where people make mistakes, where hurried hands, greedy eyes, and midnight conversations reveal everything. I went to bed with my phone streaming the charger's audio to the cloud, the pen tucked in my pocket, the clock's little black eye watching the dining room. For the first time since I'd come home, I slept planning the trap instead of dreaming of escape. The lab called on a Wednesday, like some awful clinical punchline. I dropped the grainy residue off at a clinic 2 towns over and told myself I was doing the grown-up thing. Proof, not vengeance. When the text said, "We found benzodiazepines in the sample," my hands went numb. Not just sleeping pills, something potent enough to sedate a person if mixed with the other meds I supposedly needed. My throat closed like a fist. I called Tristan first. He swore and told me to get to the station now. I didn't. I drove to the one place I felt slightly less alone. The old diner where the guys in my unit used to meet before flights. I sat there with coffee I didn't want and went over everything in my head. Every laugh, every plan I'd recorded, the loan forms, the way Dad had been cheerful while reading funeral brochures. It all became a chain link in my head. The lab result was the missing link. I went to the police that afternoon and asked to speak with someone who handled fraud or violent crimes. They brought me Detective Morris, mid-40s, quiet, too good posture, the kind of cop who's seen the underbelly and learned how to make it show up in a courtroom. I ran him through the timeline, my fake diagnosis, the loan form, the recordings, the coffee residue. I handed over the cloud folder and watched him scroll. He didn't blink. "This is serious," he said. "We need to be surgical. We'll catch them in the act, but you're not a bystander in this. Your lie complicates things. You understand that?" I did. I'd already signed up for that cost. I nodded. Morris laid out a plan that felt like a war map. He wanted witness presence, an insurance investigator to interview Dad, a hospice social worker to witness medication conversations, and a controlled environment for an arrest. He wanted me wired. He wanted the devices I'd planted to keep rolling as a backup. He asked about anyone who'd shown up ready to collect, and I told him about the man with the heavy accent who'd been calling Dad, making threats over money. Morris's face went flat. He said they'd run the number. Back home, I moved like a ghost. I told no one except Tristan and the detective. I checked the cameras, swapped batteries, pushed the pen back into place on the kitchen counter. I replayed the footage from the charger and smiled when I heard Pender's stupid laugh. There it was, him practicing my signature in the middle of the night on a ripped envelope. "You'll be rich, man. You'll see." That laugh was a bell. Morris called me that night. He'd checked my cloud folder and the lab receipts. He said he'd coordinate with Evelyn, an insurance investigator who'd volunteered to come in undercover to audit the policy, and with Margaret, a hospice social worker who'd agreed to a family meeting. He wanted everything to collide: insurance audit, hospice intake, and police presence, at the same time, so nobody could wiggle out or shred the story. I sat on my couch with the recorder clipped to my belt and thought of the old photos on the mantel, beach days, a Father's Day, a crooked grin that used to be mine. The house breathed around me. In the next 24 hours, everything I'd built, my storage unit, my fake medical forms, the pen devices, the coffee sample, had to be ready. The trap was set. The stakes were no longer about money. They were about staying alive in a house that had been baiting my death. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and fear. I sat on the couch with the transmitter clipped to my belt, and my heart doing that dumb soldier thing, steady enough to do the job, loud enough I could feel it, in my teeth. At 1:30, I heard tires and my throat went tight. Detective Morris had said to stay where I could be seen. That way, the wire would pick everything up clean. I positioned myself in the living room so the camera on the clock had the best angle of the dining table where they always did the real business. At 2 Gauber, Margaret knocked and walked in like she did this every week. Gentle smile, leather folder, professional calm. She sat, asked the usual hospice intake questions, and I answered with every little performance I'd rehearsed. The cough, the wince, the quiet, the "I'm tired" voice. My family swam in their roles. Mom the martyr, Dad the practical organizer, Cecilia the choking back tears daughter. Pender leaned against the wall like he already owned the future. Marguerite took notes, asked about meds, and my stomach churned when Mom described the sleep schedule she'd been keeping to help him rest. At 2:15, there was another knock. Evelyn from the insurance company came in, folder in hand, eyes like a shark that read titles, not faces. She introduced herself, sat, and opened her audit packet. Dad's smile faltered the moment she mentioned login timestamps and a loan against the policy. Evelyn asked for access logs. Dad stammered about helping me because I was too weak. Cecilia, always eager to make things tidy, tried to explain. Too much talking, not enough thinking. Pender laughed at one point, the sound brittle and too loud. Marguerite stopped writing once Evelyn started asking precise questions about medication management. Who handled meds, where they were stored, how often. Mom's voice narrowed into defensiveness. She said she'd only been giving him something to help sleep. Margaret asked what, and how often. The room stiffened like a muscle, ready to snap. Then Detective Morris walked in with officers. It felt like someone hitting a switch. He identified himself, said they were conducting an investigation into fraud and attempted poisoning, and began separating everyone. My chest felt like it could fall out of my shirt. The officers moved with practiced calm, one with Mom, one toward Dad, another toward Pender. Cecilia's face went pale like someone had blown the color out of her. She whispered my name like she was afraid of the sound it made. Pender tried to shove past an officer to get to me. A cop's hand on his shoulder stopped him, as if gravity had been reassigned. He started to argue, pregnant with incriminating bravado, and an officer read him his rights for something I'd heard on TV in 1,000 different voices. Dad's hands shook when the officer showed him a printout of the portal access timestamps. He went silent. Mom's breath got sharp. She started to cry, loud and real, not the clean, practiced grief from earlier. Outside, tires crunched on gravel. 2 men in suits, part of the Lone Shark crew, walked up the walk like they were collecting on a bill. An officer at the driveway intercepted them, asked for ID. One of the men tried to push by, and the officer moved faster than I'd expected. Cuffs clicked, and the man went down in a small angry heap on the grass. The other one argued and then paused when the officer radioed and ran his information. Outstanding warrants popped up like a bad surprise. They were cuffed on the lawn. Watching those men get put into the back of a squad car felt like the house inhaling for the first time in months. Inside, evidence techs trailed in with cameras and evidence bags. They photographed the coffee cup I'd saved. They lifted the pen from the counter like it was an unassuming relic and found the microchip inside. An officer bagged funeral pamphlets, loan forms, the fake accelerated benefit application I'd left on the table. Mom, mid-sob, kept saying she only wanted me comfortable. They read her the charges, attempted poisoning. Her face moved through denial to the hollow, stunned shape of guilt. Cecilia's eyes found mine, and for a heartbeat I saw everything. Shock, then understanding, then a flash of something close to hatred. She lowered her head and started to tremble. Pender was taken aside, cuffed for questioning. Dad was handcuffed after an hour, when the forged portal access and loan paperwork were laid out in front of him. I sat there and watched my family become a scene the way our old home videos used to be a movie, only now the laughter was gone and evidence bags took their place. When they led Mom out in handcuffs, she looked at me like I'd killed something inside her. Maybe I had. Outside, neighbors whispered and cameras clicked. Inside, the house felt too big and too empty. The detective put a hand on my shoulder, gentle, the way you hold someone who just watched the thing they loved walk out the door in irons. You did the right thing, he said. I wanted to believe him. My voice wouldn't come. They loaded them into cars. As the back door slammed, as lights flashed and officers walked slow and sure, I felt an odd, terrible calm. The trap had worked. They were being carried away by their own choices. But the victory tasted like ash. The house was quiet now, but not peaceful. The cameras kept rolling. Evidence tags rustled. The photo album on the coffee table gaped open to a picture of us on the beach, all smiles frozen in a time when I still wanted them back. I picked it up, thumbed the corner, and let the weight of it settle. I gave my full statement at the station that night. The fluorescent lights buzzed, the camera in the corner blinked red, and my voice felt like it belonged to someone else as I walked Detective Morris through every second of the past few months, the fake diagnosis, the recordings, the coffee, the loan, the hospice meeting, all of it. He listened, took notes, and when I was finished, he said, "You know, they'll still look at your lie about the cancer." I told him I understood. I didn't lie to make money. I lied to survive. Mom was booked for attempted poisoning, no bail. Dad for insurance fraud and identity theft. Cecilia and Pender for conspiracy and forgery. By the time I was allowed to leave, they were all sitting in separate rooms under different fluorescent lights, the same buzz that filled my ears now echoing over their own confessions. When I stepped outside, the air felt wrong, too clean, too quiet. For the first time in months, no one was waiting to kill me, and I didn't know what to do with that. The fallout came fast. Extended family flooded my phone with accusations and sympathy in equal measure. Half of them thought I was a manipulative liar who'd faked cancer to destroy my parents. The other half called me brave for surviving them. I stopped answering after the first day. I wasn't ready to justify myself to anyone who hadn't heard the tapes. My new lawyer handled the insurance company. They froze the policy, investigated Dad's access, and offered me a deal. I'd repay the $100,000 loan plus penalties, testify about the forged paperwork, and they'd drop any claim of fraud against me. It would wipe out most of my savings, but at least I'd stay free. I moved into the penthouse I'd kept hidden, the place I'd bought before coming home, the one with clean walls and no ghosts. I installed a real lock, a new camera at the door, and filled the fridge with actual food. The first night there, I didn't dream about war or family or poison. I just stared at the ceiling, waiting for guilt to kick in. It didn't come the way I expected. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull, steady, like a bruise that never quite healed. Therapy helped. My counselor, a calm woman who'd heard worse, told me that grief doesn't need a body to be real. You can mourn people who are still alive. Sometimes I still think about that first day home. Mom's shocked face, Dad's disappointment, Cecilia's half smile. I used to think the worst part was realizing they wanted me dead. Now I think it was realizing how easy it was for them to pretend they didn't. 3 months later, I started a job at a veterans center, helping other guys who came home to find everything changed. I tell them not all battles end overseas. I tell them family can be the hardest war. Some nights, when the city is quiet, I play one of the old recordings, just to remind myself I wasn't crazy, that it all really happened. Then I turn it off, pour a drink, and let the silence settle in. I'm alive. They're gone. And sometimes that's the only victory that matters.